welcome to the Lottery Trust Fund Task Force. We don't have any minutes to approve from our last meeting, but we do have some presenters today. Looking forward to hearing about some of the programs in KHEAA. We'd like to first call the roll, please.
Senator Boswell. Here. Senator Neal. Here. Senator Tishner. Here. Senator Wilson. Here. Representative Grossberg.
Here.
Representative Rawlings.
Here.
Representative Riley. Here. Representative Timoney.
Here.
Co-Chair Deneen.
Here.
Co-Chair McCool.
Here.
All right, seeing we have a quorum, I would like to invite our speakers up to the table. We have with us today Becky Gilpatrick, the Director of Student Aid Services with KHEAA, and Diana Barber, the Interim CEO and COO of KHEAA. Welcome to our committee. Please make sure your mics are turned on, and please introduce yourself.
Good afternoon. I'm Diana Barber, the Interim Executive Director for Kentucky Higher Education Assistance Authority.
And I'm Becky Gilpatrick, the Director of Student Aid at KHEAA.
Thank you. Whenever you're ready.
Okay. Well, thank you. I want to thank the committee for this opportunity to talk to you about this critically important mission of providing access and affordability and success for students and families of Kentucky to achieve their post-secondary pathways, be it four-year college or career and technical education. We do a lot at KHEAA to promote access and success, starting with our 529 savings plan that we've been administering for over 4 decades, as well as we have outreach counselors who go out in the field and help students determine how to go to college and what they should study for their post-secondary success. And I have some of my esteemed colleagues with me here today from KHEAA who do all of these things for KHEAA. So we're very happy to be able to talk to you today about what we provide as far as grants and scholarships. So thank you.
Okay, I'll take us through the slides. First, I wanted to start off by just looking at some general information about how financial aid works. And so just to let you know that the state aid programs that we have, the grants and scholarships, they work alongside the federal student aid and the institutional aid, and it's all stacked on top of each other. So what you're looking at with this slide is just some examples of how that might work at the different sectors. So we have, the KCTCS, what a representative financial aid package might look like, what it might look like at one of our four-year universities, and one at the private colleges that are 4 years. And so we've just kind of sectioned off pieces of this, and this starts with a family that has an expected family contribution of $2,093, and so that is that blue line at the bottom. And their portion of the Pell Grant is a partial portion. It's not full. You have to zero EFC to have a full Pell Grant. So we've got $4,800 in there for Pell, and then we layer on top of that what a maximum cap grant would be for this year. And then at the private schools, you have a little yellow section there that has the Kentucky Tuition Grant, and we'll talk more about all the state aid. And then the KEYS scholarship, that $1,500 is just an average award amount we threw in for the example. And then we just did, some rough estimates on what institutional aid might look like. Not all the institutions do that, and it's a varying amount that comes out of their pockets. And then we averaged in some federal student loans to kind of show that you can get to the full cost of attendance at the public colleges, 2-year and 4-year, and you can do it with having a little remaining need at the private universities. So, without a tremendous amount of student loan debt, but there is some still there, and so we're working to eliminate that. Let's start off talking about KEYS. This is probably the most popular program we have. Everybody knows this one pretty well. I won't spend a lot of time on it, but if you're not already familiar with it, the way KEYS is earned is incentive-based. It's based on the GPA that the students earn each year. They're in high school, and that's their annual GPA. And then we give them an award for 9th, 10th, 11th, and their 12th grade year. And for a 2.5 GPA, they can earn $125, and then it ranges up to if they have a 4.0 GPA or higher, they have $500. So if you're quick at math, 4 years of 4.0 GPA would get you $2,000 worth of KEYS. And then we have some bonus awards. There's an ACT bonus. It's based on the highest ACT score that they attain prior to high school graduation. So if they score 28 or better on their ACT, that's another $500. That gets us $2,500 on that award. If they're lower than that, it tiers down to a score of 15, and that's $36. For our low-income students, we have supplemental awards that are based on advanced placement or International Baccalaureate or Cambridge Advanced International exam scores. And so those awards range from $200 to $300, and we give that bump to those low-income students every time they have one of those passing exam scores. So there are some low-income students that are able to add, $1,000 or $2,000 to their keys by taking those exams and scoring well. So, but the total amount that they earn while they're in high school, that becomes the annual amount that they have available each year of college. There are some renewal requirements once they get to college. So they have to have at least a 2.5 GPA and be making progress toward graduation. And that's as their school determines that progress, being on track to graduate. But as long as they can do that, they'll renew that same amount. So, for instance, if we had $2,500 of keys at the end of high school and they renewed that all 4 years of college, that would be $10,000 worth of scholarship right there for their keys. We do also have on this last piece of it about registered apprentices and workforce trainees. There was some provisions made, and we'll talk about legislative history here in a moment, where folks who are not going to college directly but they're going more into careers can request reimbursement from their KEAS accounts for their training expenses for those programs. So this is what I was referring to for legislative history, just to give you a brief overview of the major changes that have happened to KEAS over the year. 2008 was probably where we had the largest change as far as increasing expenditures. And during that session, that's when the supplemental awards for the low-income students was put into place. But it was also where this on-track to graduate requirement was put into place. And at that point, prior to that, students had to have a 3.0 cumulative GPA to keep the full award amount. And that on track to graduate, the way that works, it kind of lets them come back to a 2.5 GPA. And we look at the college GPAs, the cumulative GPAs each spring semester once they get to college to determine the renewal. In 2013, we did have some awards for students in comprehensive transition and post-secondary programs. Those are students who have intellectual disabilities. There are only a handful of colleges in the state that even offer those programs, and they're very small awards. So students who qualify for that, they get a KEAS award that's a few $100s that they can have every year. We don't look at renewal requirements for them. It works a little bit differently. If they earned KEAS while they were in high school, then they're allowed to have that on top of it. So it's really like a little bonus for those students to help them out. 2015 and 2016 was just increases to other things that we already had in place. 2018 is where we had registered apprenticeships start to come into the program, and that's where they could request that reimbursement for their training expenses as part of their apprenticeship program. And in 2019, that was expanded to certain qualified workforce trainees. And during this last session, that piece was expanded again to students who are in the KCTCS Workforce Solutions, students who are attending the Kentucky College of Art and Design, and to students at certain proprietary schools. So we're working out the logistics on that, working on implementation for that right now.
Representative Timmy, do you have a question on this slide here that we're on?
Yes, Chairman. Very, very briefly, and just as, when was the last time that the amount was increased for?
I'm glad you asked.
For KEAS.
The base amount, the one that's on GPA, has not been increased since the program began in 1998.
Okay, and college tuition has not increased also since 1998, correct? Thank you, Chairman.
I wish.
Thank you for pointing that out. Go right ahead.
Okay, this is just shows the last few years of disbursement activity, and we've kind of, through all the programs, I've given you the same information for all of them. You will notice I've got this current year listed at the very bottom with an asterisk. It's not a full year yet. It won't be a complete year until the end of this month. But this is what things look like at the end of May for us. So they're very close. There'll still be a little jiggling going around. But as you can see here, the number of recipients has decreased over the last few years with KEAS. Some of that was COVID, and some of it is just simply that the population size is getting smaller. we're having fewer and fewer graduating seniors show up in the population that's reported from the high schools. And so that's exactly why these numbers are trending downward for KEAS right now. Okay. We're good. I'll move on to talk about our state grant programs. This, I think, is where we're probably making the largest change, or I should say the largest impact on trying to eliminate student loan needs for our low-income families. We have two different state grant programs. One's the College Access Program, and that's our primary program. It's for the neediest, financially neediest students. All of these students, to qualify for the Pell Grant, CAP grant, they're Pell eligible, and they have to complete a FAFSA form to do this. So these students have to also be enrolled at least half-time to qualify for this money. And so they're partial award amounts until they're full-time, and then they can have that full amount. I've listed on there the maximums for this past year. KHEAA is holding the maximums at the same level for next year as well, and that's a maximum of $2,500 at the two-year colleges, which would be our community college system, and $5,300 at the four-year institutions, both public and private. Our Kentucky Tuition Grant is a tuition equalization grant that's for students who attend the private colleges. This particular grant program has a statutory formula, so the award amount cannot be more than 50% of the per state equivalent appropriation per full-time student. So for this year, that's $3,200. For next year, to be $3,300. We do require students to be enrolled full-time to receive these particular KTG funds. And we do this on a first-come, first-served basis. In the years past, first-come, first-serve always led to us running out of money early, but we have been very fortunate the last few years, and we've had excess lottery transfers, and we'll show you that in a moment, and that is helping us extend the longevity of this out so we can actually continue to award CAP and KTG into the full school year and for the majority of the year, so we can have students really all the way around continue to receive these funds even if they apply late once the school year begins. This is a look at what our CAP grant disbursement activity is, what it currently looks like. You'll see the number of applicants and our recipients are trending downward on this. This has somewhat to do with population size, but it also has to do a lot with COVID. You'll see 2020, at the end of that year, that was March 2020, when all of the pandemic began. And so we had a strong dip in enrollment at that point, and we are trying to rebound from that. And so that kind of explains that. Now, I'll also say on this, you'll see the dollars going up recently, and that's because of a new award structure that we've implemented. So with the CAP grant, we had an award. I mentioned in the previous screen that our awards were sitting at $2,500 at the 2 years, $5,300 at the 4 years. We just started a tiered award system a few years ago. Prior to that, it was one award for everybody, and we held that at $1,900, and that was that way for 13 years, from 2007, up into the late teens. And so now, fortunately, we've had enough money where we have been able to increase the award amount. So that's why you're seeing $170 million dispersed this year with the CAP grant alone. This is the Kentucky Tuition Grant. And it's kind of the same trends going here, where this is the private colleges. Those award amounts always remain around the $3,000 level just because of the way that the formula works on the award calculation. And these are the excess lottery transfers that I was talking about earlier. 2017 is when we started to receive those excess transfers for the CAP and KTG programs. And so what I have given you here is the amount of the transfer each year, how much we divide it between CAP and KTG, and kind of what the recipient counts would be based on the average awards for those years. So there is another $3 million transfer that was put in the budget that will come at the end of this year and the end of next year. Those transfers usually are made to KHEAA right at the very end of the fiscal year, so they end up being continuing appropriation into the next fiscal year for us. So. All right. This slide kind of shows why it's so important that we have that $5,300 award amount and why those CAP grant awards have increased. What we're looking at here in the blue bars, that's the average tuition and fee rates for each of the sectors. The yellow bar shows what a maximum Pell Grant would be, so those are the neediest students who have those 0 expected family contributions. The green bar is what our maximum CAP grants are. And then, of course, you can see the difference. So we are currently in a very fortunate position where we can cover tuition and fees with Pell and CAP combined for our 2-year and our 4-year regional colleges, and we're very close to being able to do that at University of Kentucky and University of Louisville. So keep in mind, though, that not everyone qualifies for a full Pell Grant, but if you're eligible for just $1 of Pell Grant, you can get a full CAP grant. So that is varying, but this just kind of sets it up to say this is possible for the neediest students that tuition is covered. I should also mention here, because it looks like, you know, there's some excess going on here if you look at this slide the right way, but that's not really the case because this is only showing tuition and fees. All of the aid that we're talking about here can be, well, the state aid, the CAP grant, and it can be applied to anything in the cost of attendance. So that includes the room and board, the books. Financial aid offices will package, they'll have an allowance for living expenses and things for the students. So it's tuition, those direct tuition costs, plus those indirect costs that make up the full cost of attendance. So that money is not a check that's going back to the student. It really is money that's helping them pay that full cost of attendance. As far as where we are with future state grant considerations, we have a few different things on the move that we want to make you aware of. Of course, you know, we would like to be able to maintain the levels of funding that we have with the CAP grant program and keep especially that 4-year award up to $5,300, if not to be able to increase that, to keep matching the tuition rates as tuition keeps increasing, especially with our 4-year colleges. But we also have some changes coming up with the FAFSA. And we have, you know, some enrollment trends that are starting to trend back up. And so I want to explain that just a little bit more. The FAFSA, there was a FAFSA Simplification Act in 2021 that will make changes starting with the 2024-25 school year. So that is the next filing year that's coming up. The U.S. Department of Education has given us some of the information on this. They haven't told us exactly everything that's going to happen, even though that form is rolling out at the end of this year. So what we would normally have is a FAFSA that starts in October, but because of this new form being implemented, the department is saying now maybe December. They're looking at December. We won't be surprised if it ends up being January, but we're planning on December, and so we have a lot of work going on around that. The things that will impact the grant programs, though, is that the expected family contribution is going away. It is now turning into a student aid index. And with that comes a new federal methodology. Some of the questions on the FAFSA are being replaced. They're getting some new questions in there. But they are going to link directly with the IRS as part of the process. Overall, what this is going to do to us, transitioning to the student aid index, the way the calculations will work, it will make more students eligible for the federal Pell Grant, which in turn will make more students eligible for the state grant programs, the need-based programs as well. KHEAA has partnered with KHEAA, the State Higher Education Executive Officers organization. We've been doing some modeling with them, and we used all of our FAFSA data from this current 22-23 year and let them run it against their tool that does an estimate of the new methodology to see how that would come out. And so what we have here is what I've put on the screen for you. It showed that if we had had that in place for this past year, we would have had 15,500 additional students that would have been eligible for Pell and for CAP grant. And using an average CAP grant amount for this year, that would have totaled almost $50 million extra that we would have needed to keep the CAP grant program funded for as long as we did. Okay. Now, the other flip side of that is that because more students will qualify for the CAP grant, it will actually help funding for the Work Ready program go a little further. And I'll get more into the weeds about Work Ready in a minute, but Work Ready is not a need-based program, so if you qualify for other aid, then that eliminates your need for Work Ready. So we should be able to extend the applicant pool on the Work Ready program when all this takes place. This was the last piece that I had on the impact slide. And I'm sorry this looks like a little bit of a mess, but I'm going to walk you through it here. What we have here is the last several years of what our undergraduate first-time FAFSA filers have looked like in Kentucky. And keep in mind, these are the first-time filers, so they're new students. This is trending upward. You can see there at the very top, you've kind of got a thin gold and blue bar that are almost together. That's 17-18 and 18-19, and then you kind of come down 19-20. If you look at the thick bars, though, that really thick blue bar, that's the current year. And what you see there is it is surpassing what we had in 21-22, and it has now surpassed where we were in 2021. So that's coming back up. The red bar, the thick red bar there, that is for next year, and we've been collecting those FAFSAs and that data since last October. And so that is trending up even higher than the current year. The institutions, we've discussed this with them, they're seeing similar enrollment trends on their campuses. So that's suggesting that we have first-time students starting to come back to school, and we're starting to recover from the pandemic all the way around.
Before we go into the Work Ready side of this, is there, can we take a minute here? Is there any questions up to this point? I know we've been through a lot of slides. Is there any member that has a question that we can, Senator Boswell?
Yes, thank you. Yes, I have a question. So there's basically three programs we've been talking about so far: the KEYS program, the CAP program, and the KTG program. And one thing I'm concerned about is that I represent and I'm aware of a lot of middle-income families, middle maybe to slightly more than middle-class families. What do we have for these families that have children who are working, in school, getting 4.0 averages? It seems like what I'm hearing is a lot of these students are not really receiving any aid. So of these programs that we're talking about so far, what is there here for a middle to slightly upper class family?
Those families would all qualify for KEYS if they had
Yes.
students in Kentucky high school. So that's would be their aid we could count on. If they were attending a private college, they could also receive Kentucky tuition grants. So the need calculation for the KTG program works slightly different than it does for the CAP grant program, but it does do some allowance because the schools can compare, what their cost is to what that EFC amount is to give some remaining need for KTG. So it is possible for those middle-income families to get that.
But so basically of these three programs, the KEYS program is a for sure.
Yes.
The other two are maybe.
If they go to the right school. Right.
Are there any other questions at this point? All right, you may proceed.
All right, thank you. All right. We'll go into the Work Ready Scholarship next, as this is a program that is growing in leaps and bounds with popularity over the last few years, and it's still a relatively young program as well. This particular scholarship provides assistance for students who are seeking an industry-recognized certificate, diploma, or associate of applied science degree in a designated high-demand workforce area. And so what you have here is the five main areas that we have for this. We did have a legislative change a session ago that also carved in the allowance for students in comprehensive transition and post-secondary programs. And that's that same group with intellectual disabilities that I mentioned back when we were talking about KEYS. So they're eligible for Work Ready regardless of what they're studying. The award itself works a little differently as well. It is based on the in-state tuition rate at KCTCS, and the award is the number of hours the students enrolled at that KCTCS tuition rate minus their federal and state aid. And so for us, we look at how much Pell they receive, their CAP, their KTG, and their KEYS, those things. So if the students, the applicants for Work Ready receive any of those other forms of aid, and that amount exceeds what they would have in their tuition rates, then they have Work Ready that will go in and cover that tuition. It would knock them out if they receive the other aid. So another way to think about this is that could be a program that would benefit those more well-to-do families, because those are the families who will not qualify for student aid. The eligibility for this, it goes until they've received funds for 60 credit hours or until they've received their first associate degree. There was a limit of 4 semesters of receipt, and that was removed from the program, I believe, in the 2021 session. This is a look at the work-ready disbursement activity. As you can see, the number of applicants has grown leaps and bounds over the last several years, and this actually goes back to the beginning of the program. 2018 was the first year that we had work-ready disbursement activity. The recipient numbers are a lot lower than the applicant numbers just because of the way that calculation works. The largest number of students who are denied for work-ready is because they have other aid that knocks them out of the work-ready need calculation. All right, I will also add here that the work-ready scholarship statutorily allows for KHEAA to award funds for the fall semester, spring, and summer. However, funding has only supported fall and spring since the program began. We've never had a summer term, so we're not sure what that would actually add on to the program if it was funded all the way through summer. This past year, this past spring, KHEAA cut the awards off early as well for Work Ready, just because there was so much demand for the program, we exhausted funding. And that also included some transfers. We transferred $3 million from the dual credit program over into Work Ready on top of the base for Work Ready, just so we could fund all the commitments we had into January. We wanted to make sure that the students who had applied coming into the spring semester at least had a chance to get some money. So that's what we did, and that's where we're at $13 million dispersed on Work Ready this year.
We have just a couple of questions.
Sure.
Co-Chair McCool.
Thank you, Chairman. On the Work Ready, I'm kind of going along with what the Senator said too. We've got a middle class that's not sometimes being left out. But in addition, what about those who are retraining? Mm-hmm. Will Work Ready cover that cost? And it's with the KCTCS only. So if they went to a regional university, it doesn't cover it. It goes only to KCTCS.
Well, the award amount is based on the KCTCS rate. There are some four-year colleges who participate. They offer programs that qualify for Work Ready, but it would not cover the full cost at those colleges because it's limited to the KCTCS rate.
Okay, so out of the tuition for a year for somebody to be retrained, mm-hmm. How much of that would be covered by?
It depends on the number of hours they're enrolled. If they were a full-time student, we're looking at roughly $4,800 would be what KCTCS tuition would be this year.
Semester, a year?
For the year.
Okay.
Somebody can check my math here, but I'm pulling it off the top of my head.
That's okay.
But so if you're looking at somewhere like, EKU, for example, they're kind of the middle ground there. I think their tuition runs about $8,000, this past year, somewhere in that ballpark. So, they would have, about $4,000 left over that Work Ready would not cover. So, but they could, possibly have student loans, something like that would cover it. So,
yeah, trying to avoid the student loans.
Yeah, we would
Another
like
issue.
to.
Thank you. Thank you.
We have one more question. Representative Timoney.
Thank you, Chairman. So, for the past two sessions, we've voted to expand KEYS to a lot of the programs it seems that Work Ready scholarships would qualify for. Is there some redundancy there, or is that something? Do you see what? Am I making sense with that question?
You're making perfect sense. There's not really redundancy because the way the KEYS reimbursement piece works, it's not tied to the high demand work sectors. It really looks at the students who are in registered apprenticeship programs. This last change that came in this last session, there is some tie to the high five work sectors in that, but that's for allowing those small proprietary schools in. And that would be the schools that are not able to participate in on the traditional college pathway side. So that's not your Sullivan University, for example. These would be your smaller mom and pops, the welding schools, different places like that would fit in there. So it would give them an avenue if they could have their keys, they could have some remaining expenses, and the work ready could help cover the difference. So again, if that was, say, a middle income family who did not qualify for any of the need-based aid, they might be able to use their keys to do the reimbursement there and get their keys money, and they could have their work ready. If for some reason they weren't in a qualifying area for keys, then the work ready would cover that full amount for them.
Okay, and I see what you all are doing, and I see what this program does. I mean, you've got a finite amount of resources that we're trying to allocate to the greatest need, and I'm almost hesitant to even bring this next suggestion up, but even wading into the fields where there's the highest demand or the highest need for employees versus we're not giving aid for butterfly farmers. Do you see what I'm saying? Do you keep track of that data, and are those recommendations that you all do, or is that going to be something that we would need to do from a policy standpoint?
The top 5 areas that are designated for the program, the way the statute lays that out, it says that that's the top 5 is designated by the Kentucky Workforce Innovation Board.
Okay.
So I can tell you, actually I'll go to this next slide because it was coming up anyway. Those 5 areas, what we have right now and what we've had since 2018, because they haven't changed, that came from a study that was done by a third-party entity in 2011. We have had some conversations with the Workforce Innovation Board, and they've met to try to figure out how to reevaluate what the high-demand areas are in Kentucky now. I cannot give you a date as to when that will take place and when we'll actually have answers as to what our high demands are at this point in the state, but that is one consideration that we need to narrow the focus of this
Right.
down a bit.
Thank you, Chairman.
All right, you may proceed.
All right, thank you. I'll also add there, as you can see, we currently have 2,800 programs of study that are approved and on the list between all of our participating colleges. I've already mentioned that we have not had funding for summer term awards, so I'm laying all this on the table so that as you all think about the lottery funds and how to apply those. These are the things that impact Work Ready. We do have, and I've mentioned, the cutoff in the application cycles there. And so a lot of Work Ready, because it's not need-based, we're in an odd position, I'd say, at KHEAA to figure out exactly, how we request the funds in the budget submission for Work Ready. If we are to request the full amount and what the growth would take to fully fund it, or if it's, a generous amount that would help cover the most of it, because, we do recognize that there is a finite pool of money, and, our tradition is to look at the need-based aid programs to try to cover the low-income families.
Is it my understanding that the reason why it's not being used currently for summer terms or summer program is statutorily, or is it policy from your end?
We just don't have the money.
Okay. Is it financial?
It's financial.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah. And
I just
as
want to
I
make that
mentioned,
clear.
Sure. If I could go back and just touch on that a bit more. In 2022, the base general fund appropriation for Work Ready was $7.8 million. For this current budget cycle for 23 and 24, the base appropriation is 10.8, which is the $3 million increase. And as I mentioned, we transferred $3 million from the dual credit fund into Work Ready, so that's actually an additional $6 million, and we are almost spending all of that this year.
Thank you.
So Work Ready's just out of money. All right. Our dual credit scholarship is another relatively young program that is gaining a lot of momentum. This is for high school students in grades 11 and 12 who are taking dual credit while they're in high school. This will go to students at the public schools, the private high schools, and the homeschool students. They have to meet their post-secondary admissions requirements to be allowed into the dual credit coursework. The institutions that participate, most of our institutions in Kentucky do participate in this. They have to agree to do this at a discounted rate. And so what that rate is for the current year is $91 per credit hour. So that is a substantial savings for those families. The scholarship will cover 2 of their general education courses. That's what dual credit will do right now. The institutions also have to agree to not charge any additional fees to the students. So they can't have those additional laboratory fees and things like that. The students are responsible for their books. So the books and materials, those are that's one area that we do not cover with the scholarship. So that would be the only outstanding expense that would be for the students if they do that. Sometimes the schools, they have started using the e-textbooks, and sometimes there's just an access fee with that, and so that might be the cost that they have is for that e-textbook. There have been changes to the program. They have come through the budget language for the last couple of budget cycles. And so where we are right now is with that $91 per credit hour, that's per the budget language, which set the maximum rate to 50% of the KCTCS in-state hourly tuition rate. The statutory rate is actually 33%. It's 1/3 of that KCTCS rate. So we've got a bump there because of the budget change. The current budget language also expanded the scholarship so that it will cover 4 general education courses for a maximum of 12 classes, counting the career and technical education dual credit, which we'll talk about here in just a moment. So KHEAA has divvied that up as 2 for the junior year and 2 for the senior year for those general ed courses. Work Ready dual credit is the other component, and this is where the career and technical education comes into play. The Work Ready dual credit will pay for 2 classes each year for 9th through 12th grade. So that's your 8 classes there, plus your 4 gen eds that gets to that 12. But the courses that it will pay for are limited to those that are approved through the Kentucky Department of Education as being part of a career and technical education pathway. And so those pathways are great opportunities for the high school students to explore career interests. There's pathways that will let them do construction. It will let them explore healthcare, IT. There's all kinds of things, criminal justice, police work. Teaching and learning is a big pathway that's growing to try to get more students interested in becoming teachers. And so dual credit classes that are associated with those pathways, the Work Ready Scholarship covers 2 per year for those students. So it is very possible for students to now finish high school with associate degrees, and we're seeing a lot of that increase because of the dual credit activity. The students can take additional classes and pay for it out of pocket, additional beyond the scholarship limits, and many of them do. The institutions, it works exactly the same as the regular dual credit program as far as the way the institutions have the limitation on the fees and their hourly tuition charges. I put this slide together just to give you a very simple view of this. This is actually the part of a handout we use for the high school students. It makes it very quick and easy for students and families to understand it because it can be very complicated for everybody to understand. This scholarship does this and this scholarship does that, and here's the number you can get for which grade level you're in. And so this just kind of lays all of that out there. This is a quick overview of where we are as far as legislative history for these programs, and there has been a lot of activity for just the short time that they've been around. In 2016, the budget actually appropriated funding for a dual credit scholarship and a Work Ready Kentucky scholarship. There was an executive order that came about in 2016, but we actually started to fund Work Ready in 2018 to provide scholarships. The dual credit started in 2017. And as I've mentioned, the last couple of sessions, we've had changes that have come through, or the budget sessions. There have been changes made to the programs through the budget language. We have had several bills over the last 4 sessions that would have merged the 2 dual credit programs with each other and taken the Work Ready dual credit actually out of the regular Work Ready scholarship statute, because that's where it's buried right now, is over with the regular Work Ready program. But it would have combined everything with dual credit. And if we're successful in doing that in the future, then that would help us be able to simplify the processes and make things better for the students and the families all the way around so we can run this program better. This is a look at dual credit disbursement activity for both programs. And as you can see, they have grown steadily each year since they began. This year, the 2023 year, that is the first year that has that expansion to the 2 additional general education courses for the dual credit scholarship. And so what you have there for dual credit scholarship, that 25,840 students who have taken classes this year, those are just general education classes. And then the work-ready students who are taking those career and technical education classes, that bumped up another 4,000 students as well. So this is not the course count, this is just the student count. And you can count, probably 2 classes for most of those students. And most of those classes are about 3 hours apiece. Some of them are for a little bit more because they have laboratories, things like that. So we have spent close to $19 million so far through the end of May, and we're still going. So we'll see how that works out.
I think we have one question,
sure.
briefly. Co-Chair McCool.
Just quickly, on the, if you don't mind, thank you, Chairman. On the dual credit, I love dual credit, but is there a caution that we need to watch about when students getting 60 credit hours dual credit, and then when they leave and start their 4-year university, that it puts them into a category where they may not be able to carry Pell Grant, or it puts them in a different level? Do we need to be cautious about that, or not?
It doesn't hurt them from a financial aid perspective. I do think there's probably some caution with dual credit, though, for other reasons, more academic reasons. To be really successful with the planning, these students would have to really know what they wanted to do, when they grow up, when they are actually taking these classes in high school. Most teenagers haven't figured out exactly what they want to major in. And as I'm sure we've all kind of changed majors in college a couple times, and that's the norm. But what happens with dual credit is that they end up taking all these hours, and they think all hours are created equal. And they're not. Some of them will transfer. Some of them will transfer only as electives, and they won't actually count toward a major. And so there are certain circumstances where you have, a student that could be entering college, and they could have all their electives knocked out, and all they have left is their tougher courses for their major. So it does help give them a leg up, but only if they've really planned correctly from the beginning of taking this. And they can do that. And, I'll tip my hat to KCTCS because they have actually gone the distance with mapping out how this looks, especially on the technical education side. And they give this to students. It's almost a course map. If you're interested in studying welding, here are the classes we recommend for each of these years of high school that can help you then, fast track into whatever you want to do and piggyback onto the Work Ready scholarship for those 2 additional years of college to get that associate degree. And so it's that kind of intentional thought and planning that needs to take place. We have had conversations with the Council on Post-Secondary Education, about the general education coursework, and looking at that to making sure it's meaningful, that everything actually will transfer. And so there are always continuing conversations about that and making sure that what our students are taking, they actually get more bang for their buck, and that we are as well as a Commonwealth.
All right, you may proceed.
Thank you. I will move on now to some of our other lottery-funded programs. The Kentucky National Guard has a tuition award program. This program has been around for a few decades. It provides tuition payment for the National Guard members who are at the public colleges, all the public institutions. It's full tuition payment there. If the Guard member is at a private institution, then KHEAA uses an average of the 4-year publics to actually, and that's the amount that they'll receive. So we're probably somewhere in an amount of about $9,000–10,000 of tuition benefits for National Guard members who are at private institutions. And to keep in mind, if they're at the publics, it's full payment. But what we have here is the last few years of what our disbursements have looked like, what our recipient counts have looked like. I would like to note that, the base appropriation for the National Guard program has been the same amount, and that's $7 million. It's almost $7.4 million, a few hundred shy of that. And it's been at that same level since 2018. We've had conversations with the National Guard recently. We know that they would like to see that increase if possible. So we'll be working on continuing those conversations and trying to come up with a number when we have our budget submission later this year. We also have a teacher scholarship program. This program has also been around for a few decades. It is not widely known, though. It's probably our best kept secret that we would like to no longer make a secret. But it has had some funding difficulties. There were a few years of the state budget that it was not funded at all. And so during those years, we have kind of kept the scholarship alive by using some of the money that has been paid through collections. And so by that, I mean this particular program is a conversion loan program. It comes with strings attached. It starts as a scholarship, and for each semester that student receives a teacher scholarship, they're expected to work as a teacher in Kentucky and provide qualifying service. If for some reason they change that major, they do not end up being a teacher, or they just, for whatever reason, do not, may go into administration or something. If they don't have qualifying service, it converts to a loan, and then we collect on it, and we have repayment funds for that. So during those lean years, we used the repayment monies to keep the program going. During the past session, though, budget session, we had a $1 million appropriation. So we are trying to use that to grow the program again to kind of help address some of the teacher shortage issues. So this program historically has been for students who are pursuing initial teacher certification. There is an allowance in the law that will let us use it for teachers who are going back to school to seek additional credentials. That came about when we were starting up all the dual credit programs, and we needed teachers who would be credentialed to teach dual credit coursework and to be, meet the post-secondary requirements for that and the accreditation. So that's what that intent is for that. The award amount on this teacher scholarship is currently $2,500 per term, and it'll go fall, spring, and summer. There was also one of the bills passed in this last session that would allow KHEAA to, actually remove the aggregate limit that we had in place. So it would allow KHEAA to increase that award amount if we could. So right now we're just watching the funding situation and trying to find people who can actually become teachers and do this. We have a few other KHEAA student aid programs that are not lottery funded, but I just wanted to bring them to your attention since you're looking at the large pot of money with this task force. One is an early childhood development scholarship. This is also education related, but it's for people who are working with preschool age children. To receive this scholarship, they have to be working in a daycare setting 20 hours per week, so we know that there are folks who actually like to work with young children. The program was unfunded in the budget a few years ago. It was actually would have ended last year all the way around, but the Cabinet for Health and Family Services received some ARPA grant funds, and they funneled those over to us, and we've been able to keep that going so that we can have more educated preschool teachers. So that federal funding, it helped us keep the program going through the end of last year. We're running it off of that programming, or that money this year and next year. And then after that, this program runs out of money completely. And so we will be putting in this request into the budget to actually have state dollars appropriated to it once again. But other than that, this program goes away.
Well, quick question.
Sure.
Yes, I noticed that the funding rate is at full tuition and fees at a participating institution not to exceed UK's tuition rate. The other programs of which you spoke was based upon the state average. Why is this not an average and specifically based on UK?
That particular change came when the federal funding kicked in. Prior to that, the early childhood scholarship amount was $1,800 for the year. And so when we had the federal dollars, we worked with the Cabinet for Health and Family Services and the Governor's Office of Early Childhood, and they wanted that rate increased so they could help cover that full tuition rate at the public. So that's how that came to be.
Just as a follow-up, but why specifically two different metrics? In one case, it's UK's rate, and the other, it's the average. And the reason I'm asking is one better than the other, and should we standardize it so that all of the different scholarships are either based upon the average of the state institutions or UK's rate?
Yeah, I really don't have a good answer for that. All the programs the history on the programs, they all evolved over different rates of time, so I can't really say why one is looking at an average while one is looking more at a specific tuition amount.
And you went when you raised your hand there, sir. You may continue.
All right, thank you. We also are running a pilot program. The funds were appropriated to KHEAA from the KEYS program reserve account in this past budget, and it was to jointly administer a program, an innovative scholarship pilot program with Kentucky Council on Post-Secondary Education. And so what this has done is this serves two populations of students that are somewhat different. There is a humanitarian assistance scholarship that's for displaced students. Those are students who are primarily refugees or asylees that are attending school here in Kentucky. There's also a program for cultural exchange students, and that's pretty much what we think of as a study abroad program. The humanitarian assistance program is, I would say, making headlines of a sort for Kentucky. We're on the cutting edge with that program. The other states really aren't doing anything to help the refugee populations. And so we've been gaining a lot of national attention. I know that we have received requests to speak at some national conferences, different things like that to say, hey, what's Kentucky doing? How is this working out for you? For me personally, this has been a huge lesson in immigration and how documentation works and things like that. It has been very interesting. We are waiting to see. We had to start this up last summer, so the colleges didn't have a whole lot of time to recruit students to figure out how it worked. We did, for the fall semester, had 146 students who received the humanitarian assistance aid. We had 25 different countries of origin once the schools reported the data to us on who those students were. I've given you there the largest populations being from the Democratic Republic of the Congo and Venezuela and Tanzania. But we did have some students who were from Cuba and Ukraine. We had students really from all over the Sudan. It was really interesting to see. What we've learned as well is, these refugees, they really don't have a choice in where they are placed by the federal government. They're just told this is where you're going to go to live. And so we've kind of just opened that up to say they're not really Kentucky residents, but they are attending a Kentucky school. We also established a community of practice and brought in some national partners that know more about immigration and these populations than we do. And they're kind of having regular meetings with the institutions and different folks monthly to give them, tips on how to reach out, what kind of services those populations need, things like that, so we can just have be more wholly educated on exactly what the needs are for those students. But that was $10 million, and this is the first year of the pilot program. Those funds, what we don't spend this year, and we've spent about $2 million so far just in this first year, that all continues on into next year, and so we'll have a better account. The schools have to give us reports every 6 months or so to let us know who they've served and things. The study abroad piece is really kicking in this summer. That's where most of that activity is coming, so I don't have a lot of statistical information for you on that piece of the program just yet. All right. We have a couple other programs that have been transferred to KHEAA recently in the last few years. One is the Veterinary Contract Spaces Program. That program has been around for a number of years and was formerly administered by the Kentucky Council on Post-Secondary Education. But now it comes over to KHEAA, and it's in our budget. It provides tuition assistance to Kentucky residents who are pursuing their doctorate in veterinary medicine. So we have 2 different colleges that participate with us through the Southern Region Education Board. They have the Contract Spaces Program. So that's Auburn University's College of Veterinary Medicine and then Tuskegee University, both of those schools being in Alabama. There's 164 spaces, so that's the number of students we have. 152 of those go to Auburn. The other 12 go to Tuskegee each year. And so if you take that 152, divide by 4, that comes back to 38 students each year from Kentucky that Auburn alone will admit into their veterinary college who are from Kentucky. So that program is very successful. We want to keep that going. So you can have an idea, the appropriation for next year is that $5.6 million. That's about $34,500 per seat that we're paying for those students to receive that tuition benefit. We also have an optometry scholarship program. That formerly was a contract spaces program, and the legislature decided to make it a scholarship program. So that bill was passed a few years ago, and then that came to KHEAA when that change occurred. These are for students who are pursuing a doctorate in optometry. And we have 4 different institutions that participate. We have a Kentucky College of Optometry that's in Pikeville. Per the statute, 1/3 of the funding ends up going to that institution. And so we make sure that that happens. And then we have 3 other out-of-state institutions that participate in the program. These 4 institutions were really the institutions that were participating in contract spaces, and we just kept that rolling forward with the participating institutions into the scholarship program. There is a selection committee that meets each year and actually selects the applicants for this based on a variety of things. And but the current funding is supporting about 52 students, and next year's base appropriation is $848,000 and change. And then we have just 3 more programs that I'll mention here on this slide. One's an early graduation scholarship for high school students that finish. These are public high school students that graduate in 3 or less years from their school. It is a SEEK split with the school district for these students. It's a one-time award. And so what happens for that student, they're graduating in 3 years, whatever that SEEK money would be for that year they're not there, we just split with them. The district gets half and the student gets the other half for a one-time scholarship. It's about $2,000. We do not have a lot of students that do this. It's about 45, 50 kids each year. So, but that is also there. We have an osteopathic medicine scholarship for students who are attending Kentucky College of Osteopathic Medicine in Pikeville. That particular award, it uses the difference between UK and U of L's medical school rates and the Kentucky College of Optometry, and it makes up the difference in that. It is a conversion program, so just like the teacher scholarship, we award those scholarships, and for each year that that student receives a scholarship, they have to provide osteopathic medicine service in Kentucky. Otherwise, it converts to a loan and they have to repay it. The Cole County Scholarship for Pharmacy Students, it is in a similar vein. It's also a conversion loan program. They have to provide pharmacy service in a Kentucky coal-producing county, and this one is locked down to students who are residents of coal-producing counties who are providing service in coal-producing counties. And if they're unable to do that, then it converts to a loan and has to be repaid. And with that, that is the end of my presentation.
Well, first of all, thank you. You've given us a pretty thorough overview. I can honestly say I've learned quite a bit. We've gone through a lot of slides, folks, late in the day. I realize we've all been at lots of other meetings all afternoon. So thank you for your patience today. Is there any questions before we wrap up today? So I think we had a couple. So first, I'd like to, Representative Timoney.
Thank you, Chairman. Your veterinary contract spaces. That's my dad's a veterinarian, so I pay close attention to that particular realm. And I know the state of Kentucky, we have a shortage of veterinarians, large animals specifically, commodity. So we have almost enough equine, but we don't have anywhere near what we need as far as for hogs or cattle. Are we specific with what type of program they're going into? And are they required to return home?
The answer to both of those questions is no. There are no specifics as to what type of animal, small or large, or specialty area that these veterinarians need to be. And there's not currently a requirement that requires them to come back to Kentucky. There has been, I've seen stats from Auburn, and I use Auburn as an example because they have the majority of the activity there. You know, they have a very high rate of students who just return to Kentucky as is. So my understanding is that when this legislation was being considered, that the veterinarians said, we're going to have enough come back, we didn't want to put strings on it. I can tell you that the Department of Agriculture has recently started a work group that is looking at the large animal veterinarian shortage. And so I was in that meeting last week, and that will be continuing on through the summer as well to try to find a way to address that shortage area.
Sure. The shortage area is alarming, considering how Kentucky is, very heavily agrarian when it comes to that type of thing. And I believe that when my family moved to Kentucky in 1991, there were 300, and now there's less than 50, is my understanding. And that's, it's a part of our economy, and we need to make sure that we are making sure that our farmers are getting the care and their products are great. So thank you.
Sure.
Representative Rawlings.
Thank you, Chairman. I hope it's not inappropriate, but I want to heighten the awareness of homeschool students, private schools students, parochial school students. Senator Schickel filed Senate Bill 24 last session. It passed in the first week, but it didn't get heard in the House. Did you all have conversations or do projections, or do you have any comment on that? And I wanted to comment on it too.
I'm sorry. I catch a lot of bills, and so I couldn't exactly remember which one
Okay,
24
so
was about.
it was to open up KHEAA money for private, parochial, and homeschool students. I'll go ahead and make my comment.
Absolutely. I'm sorry. Go ahead.
I just wanted, like I said, to heighten awareness. You mentioned foreign students coming in, or the public schools, but we have families that have paid for homeschooling their kid their whole lives, and they're paying into the system, and really they're not being they're being treated in a discriminatory way because these, say, homeschoolers don't have access to KHEAA money, right? And they're doing, homeschool families are doing a favor to the state because they haven't used state funds. They're taking care of it themselves, whether it's Catholic school or private school, yet they're not getting the advantage of KHEAA money. And I know that's something that would need to be done legislatively. But I just wanted to mention that so everybody was more aware of it, hopefully.
Sure. Homeschool students can receive KEYS now, but they do not receive the GPA award monies
So
for
they
KEYS.
do get KEYS money.
They could get KEYS for their ACT score or their SAT equivalent. So they could get up to $500 a year for KEYS, or
But
$500 for each year of college.
But
So
can
that would
they,
be their max.
okay, so the max is different though, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, because it's just based on that ACT score award.
Yeah.
So for homeschoolers. But they're able to participate in, say, the dual credit program. They would receive scholarships for that as well.
Yeah. Okay, I just think it needs to be on an even keel for across the board. There's no reason to be less for any given group. Thank you.
All right, thank you for that question and comment. Is there any further questions? Please mark your calendars for Thursday, July 20th, 3 p.m. will be our next meeting. Thank you so much to our presenters. You all did a wonderful job.